Hello. So today's activity is putting our whole story together. And in order to put our story together, you have to know the three basic parts of a story. That would be the beginning of the story. In the beginning of the story, the characters are introduced and the problem is introduced. Then you would have the middle of the story. That's when everything happens. That's when the characters are trying to resolve the problem. When the characters are responding to the problem. They try different things to respond to the problem and try to fix it. And that's where everything happens. That's the meat, the middle of the story. And the end of the story. That's when the characters solve the problem and there's a resolution. There's some kind of message or something that we learn at the very end of the story. So you first need to understand the three basic parts: the beginning, the middle, and the end of the story. Now, let's go through our process in terms of what we're going to do today. We're going to put a whole story together. So I want to reintroduce a couple of our everyday object puppet characters. Now here we have Saltina, Salt Shaker, and Mr. Achu, Pep Pep, the Pepper Shaker. And they're going to be the main characters in our story today. So we'll put them to the side. First thing you need to do is you need to take your piece of paper and you need to put it in three sections. And I'm going to show you two different ways to do it. Let me show you this first one, which you might be familiar with. I'm putting the ends of the paper together and I'm going to press down and crease it. So having the paper long ways or hot dog, I fold those ends together and I crease it down. Then I fold it again. The other direction, I make sure my ends are together and I press and crease it down. And so now my paper has four sections. It doesn't matter if you start folding hot dog or hamburger, as long as you fold it and you make four sections. And what you want to do is take your pencil and trace those lines that you made. And if it makes it easier for you, you could use a ruler. This is a yardstick. It's just a really long ruler. And you can line it up with your line that you creased. If you want to make sure that your lines are nice and straight. Or you could do it freehand. And so now we've got four sections, and my four sections, I've got the lines there. In my first section of my paper, I'm just gonna put some lines because that's where I'm gonna put my title for my story. Now, I'm gonna put a number 1, or I could write a B for beginning. In the first section, I'm actually gonna finish writing that word, beginning. B-E-G-I-N-N-I-N-G, beginning. So this is where my title would go, and that's where the first part of my story would go. Now I'm gonna make a 2 down here, and I would put an M for middle, or I could finish spelling middle. M-I-D-D-L-E. Middle. And in the last section, I would write a 3, and I would put an E down here, or finish spelling the word end. And that's where I would draw my pictures for the beginning, middle, and end of the story. I have an example done of the story that we're doing today with our salt and pepper shaker. This is the story of seasoning time, with sections number 1, 2, and 3 filled out. And seasoning time is my title. That's one way of doing it. Let me show you another way. This time, instead of dividing the paper into 4 sections, we're going to divide it into 3 sections. You know what? I'm going to use 2 pieces, because there's 2 ways of doing that too. I'm going to take the paper, and I'm not going to fold it all the way to the end. I'm going to fold it somewhere in the middle, a little bit past the middle, and then I'm going to make a crease. Now, I'm going to fold over again. I'm folding in, and I'm going to fold it down and make another crease. And so now, I folded my paper so that there are 3 sections. And I'm going to draw my lines in here, but you can use it this way, holding it hamburger or landscape, or you could use it this way, holding the paper portrait or hot dog. Draw your lines in. And you could either label it 1, 2, 3, or beginning, middle, end, or you could turn the paper this way. Of course, you could use a ruler or yardstick if you want to make a really straight line. One, 2, 3, or beginning, middle, and end. I want to show you one of these that I finished. And this is the same story. The story, Seasoning Time. Salt and pepper, they're in the cabinet here. Salt and pepper are here, running away. The man who lives in the house is sad. And in the end, salt and pepper are happy in the middle of the table. All I did is drew something to show each part of the story. So I would draw the beginning of the story here, the middle of the story here, and the end of the story. And I can use the paper with the story all drawn out as a guide to remind me when I'm telling the story. I'm sure right now you're really curious to hear the story of what happened with Saltina and Pep Pep. This is the story, my guy right here, of seasoning time. Well, once upon a time, there were a salt and pepper shaker, and they were really good friends. They had known each other for a very long time. And they lived in a cabinet in a house. Now, the man who lived in the house did a lot of cooking. And he started to buy some really fancy seasonings. Chocolate seasoning, seafood magic, and Cajun Creole seasoning. He had all these fancy seasoning mixes, and he really didn't reach for salt and pepper very much. Salt and pepper felt lonely and sad. They were just old-fashioned seasonings, and everybody already knew what they tasted like. They weren't exciting, and the man never used them anymore. Well, one day, Saltina got an idea, and she said, "We getting out of here. We are leaving this cabinet, and he's going to have to look for us." And Achu said, I think that's a good idea. I really think that's a good idea. I'm tired of being all alone. Well, I'll tell you, they were pretty well known in the cabinet. And some of their friends decided they were going to join them too. Why? Vanilla, parsley, onion powder, garlic powder, cayenne pepper, baking soda, and baking powder heard about the plan. And they wanted to leave too, because they didn't think it was fair how Saltina and Pep Pep were being treated. So they all got into a basket, and they decided to escape one night. They got into that basket and they scooted on out of there. Well, the man that lived in the house, he didn't see all of his old-fashioned favorite flavors. Now, he liked the fancy stuff to add spice and excitement, but he needed those old-fashioned flavors to make sure that the food felt rich. He was very sad. He really did miss Saltina, Pep Pep, and all of their old school friends. He searched high and low all over the house until he looked in a closet and he found a basket of those old-fashioned seasonings. He was so excited to see them. Oh, his food was gonna taste rich and good. Just like his mama. Just like he'd been taught. And he was still gonna use some of his newfangled spices. But he made sure to have a special place for those old-fashioned flavors. He picked all of those spices together. He made a great big meal. And in fact, He put Pep Pep and Saltina in the middle of the table so that anyone in his family could season the food the way that they wanted. And you know, Saltina and Pep Pep, they started to feel appreciated, wanted, and needed. And that was the end of that. I stepped on a wire, the wire bent, and that's the way that story went. So think about your story that you want to tell. Pick your characters. Think about the setting and think of a problem. Figure out how those characters can work out that problem. And break it up into the beginning of the story, where the characters and the problem are introduced, the middle of the story, where the characters respond to the problem, and the end of the story, where the problem is fixed. Thank you. I want to hear and see these stories. Please be sure, take some pictures. Send me an email at wisewordworker@gmail.com. And have fun. I'll see you later.